Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTB World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to the way the US is moving forward, and of course, in the ways that we have seen Mr. Trump take the lead in terms of different issues with regards to foreign policy situation. And most surprisingly, that has, of course, come across in a different manner, particularly for European states and the world over, is the stance that Mr. Trump has taken with regards to Ukraine-Russian war. And we have seen that his comments with regards to Zelensky being a dictator without elections is something, of course, that has been met with a response saying that the US president is in a space of Russian misinformation. This, of course, is very, very important, integral in the ways, of course, that we have seen the issue develop and the stance change. And it seems that there is a more pro-Russia stance coming in from the US side. What that means on ground in terms of actual action to be taken, of course, it includes the delegates also being sent and of course meetings to be held with the Russian president as well. But what really that means in terms of this conflict and how exactly will the US be taking a look at the ways in which its previous support has been for the Ukraine, and then of course the larger impact that it has on the region and the entire world is something that we'll be taking a look at and of course try to understand further in terms of the US perspective. Our second segment also takes a look at another perspective of the US with Mr. Trump's rhetoric coming in, of course, with reference to his plans for Gaza and the Middle East and to make it into a area of the Middle East in terms of what, of course, was a lot of controversy in terms of the statements that he has made and the kind of plans that, of course, have been shunned and has also been something that the Arab countries has objected to with reference to taking over Gaza, owning it, and then, of course, turning this into a area of the Middle East, something denied by Middle Eastern envoy as well. And then, of course, with countries including Saudi Arabia and others taking a look at a counter proposal to this particular plan with, of course, a Palestinian state in place, and what that means also again on ground and in terms of tangible action to be taken, and with reference to the kind of steps that we have seen previously happen in the ongoing genocide in Gaza with a fragile ceasefire in place. What that, of course, will entail both from the US side and the Arab world is something that remains to be seen and will be the focus of our discussion today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by our guests, Mr. Khattak, who's Director of Communications, Center for Community Media, and Iqbal, who's a senior analyst, who will be joining us soon. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the discussion today. And Jahangir Saab, I'll start with you in terms of what we have seen so far coming in from the US side in terms of what previously, of course, the rhetoric has been with Mr. Biden and in the ways that the Ukrainian-Russian war has been looked at from the US perspective to what now we see the statements coming in from Trump. What's the difference that you can see, and then of course it infer in terms of the action that can possibly be taken in the future and the kind of stance that we see Mr. Trump be taking towards Russia?
Thank you for having me, Sana, and hello to Raja Thahab and Farooq Sahab and Anwar Iqbal Sahab. Uh, I think that the US policy of today it looks like going in completely opposite direction as compared to the policy that was in practice before January 20th. At that time, the United States' main aim was not just to help Ukraine defend itself, but also to recover the land that has been occupied by Russia. How much land Russia has occupied of Ukraine? So almost 20% of Ukraine's geography is under Russian control as we speak now. After President Trump came into office, he just doubled down on what he had been saying. And what he had been saying during his campaign, that if he was the president, this war would never have started. And then he also said that the day he comes into office, his top priority will be to end this war. And I think he followed through and he spoke to Vladimir Putin for almost 90 minutes. And after that, we saw the talks between the United States and Russia starting in Saudi Arabia, where the first big step that we came across was the US and Russia agreeing to reopen their embassies and send their diplomatic staff. And secondly, the roadmap, even though it's very vague that what would come next, but it is completely like 100% in opposite direction of what the Biden administration had been pressing and had spent almost $183 billion. Ukraine received directly or indirectly appropriations up to $183 billion, and this is according to US government data. And we saw the results, which are basically no results. So Donald Trump wants to resolve this crisis, and not just that. We saw that Trump did exchange a lot of hot words with the Ukrainian president, and then he said that he was the one, like Zelensky was the one who pushed the U.S. Into this war by helping and sending billions of dollars. And then he said, we lost so much money. Europe may have a way to get something out of Ukraine because of their investment, but the US has no chance. And then he came up with another idea, and that was that he asked Ukraine to hand the US its mineral wealth, like titanium and lithium and other deposits and rare earth mineral deposits that they have. So now the US is pressing Ukraine not just to agree to a ceasefire and a permanent peace. And we don't know what kind of peace that will be, even though a very vague map did emerge from Saudi Arabia, according to which the Americans want and Russia is agreeing to that, is first, there should be a ceasefire. Second, the Ukrainian government should hold elections. And after the elections, the new government will actually negotiate the final deal. So that's what is coming out of it. Now, in terms of the Trump policy, so Trump is looking at two things. One, that he wants to end the war, which he had promised. And second, he also wants to recover some investment that America did. And that's why Ukrainians are saying, even Zelensky himself said that you gave us, according to Zelensky, he says that America gave us about $100 billion, which is correct. That like $183 billion is very different. Like 127 billion went through Department of Defense, almost 40 billion went through USAID, and then 11 billion went through Department of State. So all these are different heads, and they went in different ways for different programs, but the US says that this is the total investment or this is the total money that was allocated for this Ukrainian war. So I think he wants that the assets or the mineral deposits should come to the US. And Ukraine is saying that you gave us $100 billion, and what you are asking is more than $500 billion. And according to a story which appeared in, I think, Washington Post, today's Washington Post actually, where they say that the way the Ukrainians are being pressed is pretty dramatic. Like when the U.S. Officials met Zelensky, actually the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, so he just pushed a document towards Zelensky and asked him that you need to sign this document. And Zelensky said, let me look at it. And he said, no, it's important that you have to sign it. And that's where he did not commit. And from there, their differences sharpened more. Now, the situation has reached, which I don't think we have seen after the World War anywhere in Europe. And that is what? Every year, as the anniversary of Ukraine war comes close by, so the United Nations General Assembly, as well as the G7, they issue statements of condemnation. And in the United Nations, a resolution is being brought, and who is opposing it? The United States. Why US is opposing it? US has concerns about two words that are being used on those resolutions, both in G7 and the UN, and that is Russian aggression and the word aggressor. Because the US, under current administration, feels that the war was not started by Russia, rather, the war was a consequence of Ukraine's actions. So all this is unfolding, and it has, I think, profound implications on European politics as well as transatlantic relations. That is, the relations between the United States and Europe, where people are really worried, concerned, and actually pretty anxious that what would come from next, because this coming week, the French president and the British Prime Minister will be in Washington, D.C. They will be meeting President Trump, and we will have a better understanding of where Europe is standing, because these big powers, after President Trump issued or just like sent out that statement on the social media where he was basically condemning Zelensky and calling him a pretty much a failed actor and a dictator who has very low approval rating. After that, the British Prime Minister picked up the phone and called Zelensky to reassure him that Europe is with him. Same is the case with France, even though France was a bit more careful. So we'll see how these meetings unfold. And after that, what would be the aftermath? Because in the age of trade wars, in the age of shifting sands in international politics, in the age of a president who is sitting in the White House, who has a very radical, maybe dramatic agenda, which has really rattled capitals across the world. Even the US capital itself has been rattled because the Trump administration is looking at laying off almost 500,000 federal government employees. The US government has 2.3 million workforce, and of that, 5 million, up to 500,000 people may be laid off. Today, as we speak, the Internal Revenue Services has started laying off 7,000 workers at the peak of taxes season where people are supposed to file their taxes. So all this is happening, and I think that it will have profound implications on international politics, and also how much can we be really sure that if the meetings between Trump and the British and French leaders do not go well, how would they transpire in transatlantic trade relations? Because the US and European Union have almost $1 trillion trade, and which is in favor of European Union. And Trump has threatened that he will slap more tariffs. So I think that it's becoming a more complicated situation, which will realign. It may lead to realignment in Europe. We cannot say for sure at this stage, but certainly things seems to be going in that direction.
Right. Faisal, I want your perspective on this too, given, of course, the fact that we have seen this discussion, of course, happen in terms of phone call between the leaders of US and Russia, and then, of course, the delegation in Saudi. And this is, of course, important in terms of the ways in which all stakeholders are involved in this consultative process or not. And we have seen that it seemed that even this decision of what the future of Ukraine is going to be is something that is going to be decided by the US and Russia. And I want your take on that in terms of the way that Trump is actually approaching these issues. And we're going to be talking about Gaza soon as well, but it seemed even then it was Israel and the US actually talking about the Gaza situation. And over here too, we have seen that happen with Ukraine. What then will be the future in terms of these regional dynamics when we have these leaders discuss issues without actually involving the other parties into the conversation?
Yeah, first of all, Sana, I would commend Khattak Saab's obviously analysis. Of course, he has given a deep analysis of it, and this is how it is right now. And if we obviously, if we want to talk about the future, I think whatever has happened since Russians, they penetrated into Ukraine from the Belarus side, we have to take that in account as well for the future. First of all, the Western countries, their policy was they were expecting that with this kind of war, and if Ukraine is helped within a matter of one calendar year, Russians would be exhausted, Russian economy would be exhausted, and they will be, of course, coming to terms with it, and eventually they would find themselves, of course, alienated in terms that Ukraine would be in a better position, and then Ukraine can be included into NATO forces as well, and that would seal for future that, of course, it has the backing of NATO, and then Russia would never dare enter in there. But when we talk about Russia, how Russia coped with its economy, I mean, we remember that in the initial phase, all of the oligarchs of Russia who had investments within Europe and elsewhere, their investments were seized, and still, I mean, they had put sanctions on Russia, and then later on, of course, we saw that Russians, they came up with this resolve that they went to China, and we remember that this meeting took place in Beijing between President Xi and obviously President Putin when they met for the Summer Olympics. During that Summer Olympics, they pledged to increase their bilateral trade from $116.7 billion to $200 billion. And Sana, amazingly, both of the countries, not only $200 billion, their bilateral trade for calendar year 2023 was $235 billion worth of trade, bilateral trade. And that was the moment, of course, it can be considered pivotal for Russia, for Russian economy, and how Russia was, of course, coping with this war. If we take the end game for Russia, what they were expecting, they wanted to, of course, get the Donbas area, which they have already got, and they declared it into obviously their own territory. They have included that in their own territory, and they wanted to occupy the coastal side of Ukraine, which till Odessa, Mariupol, Odessa, all of these sites, they are with them, and of course they had fought for this, and we have been seeing that in Mariupol was the tipping point where the war was to an extent that I mean, one day if Russia was getting ahead, then the next day we were seeing that Ukraine was getting the upper hand. But at the same time, overall the situation is the coastal side, Russia does not want to give it away to Ukraine, because they want Ukraine, the leftover Ukraine, to rely on Russia for trade in terms of course, using the Black Sea. And overall the situation, of course, looking at this equation which is coming up now, it was expected by the Trump, because he was claiming, I mean, during the elections he was claiming that the very day he gets into the Oval Office, he would pick up the phone and he would say, hey Putin, let's come down and sit and have a cup of coffee and talk over how to deal with it, and it would be resolved within an hour. This is what he claimed at that time. But somehow the kind of situation which is brewing right now, it suggests that future, I think it would be very very pivotal to see how NATO works out for the future, because US is the biggest stakeholder in the NATO forces. And when we take the example of NATO, NATO was overall looking after the security of Europe and of course rest of the NATO countries. But in this situation, of course, there will be lots of mistrusts, which it is already appearing from the Western countries. Of course, UK is concerned about, and that is why last week we saw that UK sent, I mean, Prime Minister Starmer, he sent one of the ministers into China for obviously talks, and I think they want to have sort of bilateral trade, and they want to figure out how they can have further good relations with Britain. And this is how they want to, of course, everyone wants to maintain themselves in terms that they are coming to terms with it, that in this world they have to deal with their own problems, they have to deal with their own issues. European Union, so far, of course, they will be seeing, in a way, they will be seeing lots of pressure, but at the same time they will be seeing an opportunity as well for the rebuilding of Ukraine, because currently, as it is being suggested, that the current setup in Ukraine is not being considered as a legitimate setup. That is why they are seeking an election, because they have said that the 5-year term of Zelensky has already ended, and now he should be considered as a dictator. And in this whole scenario, of course, I think Ukraine is on the losing side, and Russia has got the upper hand, and Trump is pivotal for Russia. Trump is sort of in a position to consider himself the savior of Russia and Putin. And at the same time, I think very positive role was played by Saudi Arabia as well. And for the future, I think Saudi Arabia has emerged once again as one of the key players in terms that they have played their role. We know in past Turkey wanted to play a role. They have been trying to do it, but of course it didn't work out. China wanted to play a role. They have been trying their level best, but of course it didn't work out. And now Saudi Arabia has played a very positive role in this whole equation. And to me, I think the West, there would be lots of developments in coming days. How they deal with Ukraine, that would be very interesting to see.
Right, and big statements you made there, Faisal, with the US playing the role of Russia's savior. I want your take on this, Farrukh, especially in terms of the way that while we talk about Ukraine, of course, there is also the perspective of how the US or how the Trump administration is taking a look at its relationship with Russia, and what's the motivation and what's the incentive here in terms of thawing this relationship or moving forward? Is it an economic business relationship in essence? Is it something that will favor the US in the larger run? What is the US under Trump trying to achieve here when we talk about this?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think that just to actually speak to what Faisal was saying, that Trump is Russia's savior, I think it will be very unfortunate and misguided to actually imply that President Trump is doing anything for Russia. The fact is that whatever is happening is because there is somebody who actually calls himself or his own platform economic nationalism, and that person has actually been elected to power in America. And that shows also, Sana. Their slogan was "Make America Great Again." That means that they thought that America is no longer great, but they have to make it great. And there lies the implication that America has been taken advantage of. One, international allies keep on telling America how important you are, but they keep on filching money, and they do not actually contribute as much money to the various projects that they want actually. Like for example, he said that this war is more important to Europe than us because there is an ocean in between, right? And that is very true. So the fact is that regarding Russia-Ukraine war, one thing is clear. We have with ourselves a gridlock. Because of that gridlock, nobody seems to be winning. So what happens? Do you continue this war where nukes are also present? On one side, Russia is a nuclear power. In Europe, of course, France and UK are nuclear powers. So do you allow this to keep on lingering and American taxpayers' dollars keep on going there, or something else happens? But President Trump has actually said or claimed, and the fact checkers are still trying to actually negate it, but the number is out there. The $350 billion went to Ukraine. So as in Gaza, so in Ukraine, the argument is that okay, if we have done so much for you, then you owe us some mineral deposits underground. And that has been something that was negotiated. Negotiations were going on, then they broke, and after that, suddenly Zelensky became a bad man. Zelensky has two aspects. One, it is true that he was elected for a term, and that term has expired. So you can say, although you don't call it a dictator, you can call him, caretaker or interim president until there is an election. The second thing is, of course, the whole country seems to have been knocked down. So what do you do? How do you get elected? That becomes a problem also. Now Russia, there's another angle to it as well. If you remember, just before American elections, because of Russia was, America had tried all its powers to box in Russia. Therefore, BRICS actually became such an important counter voice, and there was talk of de-dollarization. And then President Trump actually said that he is going to levy 150% tariffs on any country that goes for this kind of approach. And after that, he says everything went haywire. BRICS actually ceased to exist or something to that effect. Of course, it does not affect Russia, but it does affect other countries like China. It would affect India also, and Brazil and whatnot, right? With that kind of state of affairs, Russia has to be negotiated with. Russia is an important power. It has leverage, and if it gets desperate, the world might get stuck in a very strange kind of world order. It was earlier said that the world order is changing. The fact is that the world order, whatever it was, collapsed on the eve of Iraq invasion. After that, whatever you had was just make-believe, because UN ceased to actually function coherently, with the exception of their bureaucracies and their poverty alleviation and other bodies. They did not have that kind of punching power because there was no consensus. And then, because the world order was not there, whosoever came to American presidency actually tried to project his own imagination to the world order. Now what has happened is that America is actually trying to take the leadership back. And how does that happen? Sana, whether you like it or not, this tariff policy, these muscular positionings, all are doing something for America. In the past 1 week, America's total FDI, direct investment, right, into America has increased to $41 trillion. And this is not I saying it, it is IMF actually telling us that that is what happened. So with that kind of achievement, already he is doing something, and that's why in the among the common people, there is this sense that whatever America's system is, it does not work for them. That's why when they actually went after USAID, there should have been protest. There should have been so many people who were out there and would have protested that bureaucracy is going. But everybody thinks that these people are actually the problem. So nobody is actually crying, with the exception of Democrats who will never learn, and American media also. One last thing. Donald Trump actually, in his book, The Art of the Deal, he says that how do I negotiate? I aim really high, then I push and push and push. Meanwhile, I'm ready for the loss as well, for the lowest as well, because then when you keep on pushing, you find a common ground and where you have advantage. Yeah. So right now, I think with Gaza, with Ukraine, with Russia, he's trying to do exactly that, but it seems to be working for the American economy.
Right. Let us also welcome in the debate Mr. Iqbal, senior analyst, is joining us online. Anwar Saab, we're of course talking about the way that Mr. Trump has spoken with regards to the Ukrainian conflict and of course the relationship with Russia in the larger context. Now, I want your perspective on that, given of course what that deal entails and in the ways in which we are looking forward at the evolving dynamic of this relationship.
I think in Washington, I think people are still confused. People are still trying to understand what President Trump wants from Russia, what actually his goal is, how does he want to approach Ukraine? Because today one of his envoys said that no, Zelensky is a good leader and he has been useful, so we are not against him. But soon after that, President Trump appeared on a TV talk show, and where he said that Zelensky has lost all his cards and he is no more useful, he's not needed. So, and this is how actually this administration is dealing with not just international, but also domestic issues. They create a lot of confusion, and then they go for whatever goal that they set their eyes on. So apparently, it seems that he wants to end the war in Ukraine because he realizes that this war is not winnable, that Russia has a clear upper hand, and that America will continue spending more and more money without any gain. And this is what he did in Afghanistan. I remember during his first term, he was the one who negotiated this settlement with the Taliban. So I think he has something in his mind, and that he on his mind, and he does want to end this war in a certain way, but it's not clear how.
Right. And also in terms of the involvement, when we talk about the Ukrainian side and Mr. Zelensky, as you said, that there's conflicting views with how this is being looked at. I want your perspective also in terms of the discussion or in the ways in which this will evolve, whether or not that will involve input from the Ukrainian side or Zelensky himself, and then, of course, in terms of moving forward with the elections.
Well, this is another interesting thing happened during the last 2 hours. Actually, President Trump, in another interview, said that he thinks that Britain and France are in a good position to negotiate with Ukraine, and they should negotiate Zelensky's terms and conditions and find a way out. So, okay, while he will stick to his own position, he will let Britain and France find a solution to this thing. So as I said, people are totally lost. They're just trying to understand what does he want. Not clear at all.
And how does that impact European nations?
European nation, they are confused. They're upset. Actually, I mean, the way you remember how Vice President Pence spoke in Munich and things he said, things about lack of freedom in Europe, things about U.S. positions on certain issues. So it's like all guns blazing. I mean, they're attacking everyone on everything. I mean, what Vance said was actually that they should be people. I mean, Europe should encourage those who oppose abortion, and because they have forbidden protest outside abortion hospitals or abortion clinics, so there is no freedom in Europe. And similarly, on other issues, I mean, you can see that he has a clear agenda, and he was very clear about it during the election campaign. Also, he talked about these reforms, I mean, moving not just the United States, but the West also more towards the right. This administration has certain views on various social and economic issues. They are very clear about how they want this, which direction do they want to take this world to, and that's what they are doing.
Right. Thank you very much, Iqbal, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We're going to quickly move on to Mr. Trump's proposal with reference to Gaza as well, and of course the counter proposal that is being discussed from the Arab world. And Faisal, first your take on this, because we saw this sort of pre-Arab League taking place, and there's a conflicting opinions as to what really is the output of that. But I want your perspective in terms of what that will really mean on ground. While this is, of course, a proposal and then a counter proposal coming forward, what does that mean in terms of the countries, even the Middle East or the Arab world, actually doing about the situation in Palestine? Do plans of rebuilding and reconstructing Gaza are as simple as they are making it seem?
No, it won't be simple, but one thing is clear, Sana, and that is that Saudi Arabia once more has played the pivotal role. Obviously, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he is pivotal in this context, that he stood his ground, and rest of the obviously Middle Eastern countries, they stood their ground as well. And suddenly, of course, we saw that the statements which Trump was making, he had to, of course, reverse his stance. And now the counter policy which is coming from, once more, Saudi Arabia is leading in that, and rest of the countries, they are joining hands with it. And the obviously that policy is that, of course, we will never accept Israel until there is a two-state solution, and obviously Palestine is given a right to state, and East Jerusalem becomes its obviously capital. And when it comes to Gaza, Gaza's rebuilding, obviously they want to plan that all of the countries, the donor countries, they will be bringing them into Saudi Arabia, and the pledges will be made. And in this context, of course, Saudi Arabia itself has pledged that they will be giving $20 billion in terms of rebuilding of Gaza. And meanwhile, the plan says that people of Gaza, they can of course manage living there in whatever the circumstances there are, but the shelters would be provided to them, but obviously structures, they will be rebuilt, Gaza will be rebuilt, and this is the whole plan. To me, I think it is the essence of obviously OIC's stance. And once more, Saudi Arabia has shown to the world that OIC, Saudi Arabia has importance in the OIC, and OIC's stance is to be, of course, accepted in that context. And overall, the two-state solution is the ultimate solution, and same goes out for Pakistan as well. Pakistan believes that this is the only solution, and Pakistan will always stand wherever Saudi Arabia will be standing in this matter.
Right, your take on this, Farrukh.
Right, Sana. At the outset, I actually explained to you how Donald Trump's world works, and then who has what cards, what kind of leverage. So here's the very clear, story for anybody's consumption. While Europe has actually worked itself into poverty, it seems to be losing more money by the minute, right? The Arab world, while Obama administration's time was very harsh on them because of Arab Spring and whatnot, but they have actually in the past 9 years, they have reacquired their momentum, and they are rich, they have money, they are practically loaded. So with that, of course, they have more leverage to negotiate a better deal for Gaza. The demand essentially, Israeli concern has been that, look, they live in this kind of poverty, they come and they attack us, and because of that, we will keep on attacking them, so better actually move them elsewhere. And then, of course, Donald Trump's view was that we have been spending so much money in this region, why not claim it for our own and make money out of it? So the fact that issue can be solved in a very simple way. Of course, the Arab partners are very crucial partners for the US as well, and US cannot actually just write them off. On the other side, they can also invest in capacity building of the Gazans and build infrastructure, and then create a police which does not have Hamas there, and they can actually man that area so that there isn't any clash between the two states. So there is a possibility there. We still have to see how this shakes up, how this actually then materializes, because still there is too much negotiation, and we are going to wait and see, because of course Donald Trump will keep on pushing and pushing until he gets a good deal.
Right. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. As always, that's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.